At work, my sister dumped hot coffee on me, and everyone burst out laughing. But then my billionaire husband showed up. Within minutes, he fired the entire office. And that was only the beginning. Can you imagine watching your own family systematically erase you, piece by agonizing piece, until you're nothing but a shadow? I lived it. But what they didn't know was that every silent insult, every stolen credit, was just fueling the fire that would eventually burn their whole empire down, and my billionaire husband was ready to light the match. Let me tell you what really happened. It started subtly insidious, like a slow drip. There I was, standing in the lobby of Monroe Analytics, juggling a tray of coffees and a grease-stained bag of breakfast wraps. The Seattle chill still clung to me, even indoors. People from marketing walked right past without a nod. And in turn, Nick barely looked up from his phone to grunt, "Hey, you mind grabbing a couple extra creamers next time?" No smile, no thank you, just an expectation. It was infuriating. Did he not know I was the one who wrote the predictive sales model they were using? That I had an MBA from UCLA, not a hospitality degree? That I wasn't the damn office barista? But what could I do? I just gave him a half smile and said, "Sure thing." By the time I reached the second floor, the hot coffee was burning through my blouse. My arm ached. I paused, my eyes landing on the giant framed poster above the stairs, my sister, Mara. "Meet the visionary behind Monroe Analytics," it proclaimed, Mara smiling, head tilted just so, pretending she wasn't posing. It was the same smile she wore when she convinced our parents I was too sensitive as a kid, the same one she flashed at board members while taking credit for work she hadn't done. I was already late for the Monday meeting. The boardroom was packed, Mara's presentation already blinking on the big screen. I quietly placed the coffees and the breakfast bag at her seat. She didn't even glance up, just kept talking. "If we're serious about Q3 growth," she said, "we need to think bigger than projections. We need disruption." That was my cue. I'd spent the entire weekend building a model that could predict regional purchasing behavior based on local weather trends. It wasn't just good, it was revolutionary. Actually, I started, clearing my throat. Mara held up a hand. "Let's save the math class for later. We're not running a school here." Laughter erupted, easy and comfortable, from people who never once bothered to ask what I actually did all day. I sank into my seat, my model, my brilliant idea silenced. A VP, Thomas, actually leaned over and asked Mara, "What's Tersa's role again?" And she didn't miss a beat. "Oh, she's kind of floating support, like a utility player. She's helpful." Helpful. The word stuck in my throat like a shard of glass. I looked around, desperately hoping for eye contact, for anyone to acknowledge me, but they all either avoided my gaze or stared blankly, like I was just another piece of furniture. So I pulled out my notebook, the one no one ever asked to read, and pretended to take notes, while a part of me quietly shattered. When the meeting wrapped, I collected the empty cups without being asked. The room emptied quickly, everyone eager to get back to their desks. I lingered, needing space to breathe, to mend. That's when I felt it, eyes on me. I turned and saw Lucian Draper, head of legal, standing just outside the doorway. He was older, quiet, a man who spoke little but saw everything. For a second, our eyes met. I thought he might speak, might acknowledge what he'd just witnessed, but he just gave an almost imperceptible nod and walked away. Of course he didn't say anything, a voice in my head whispered. Silence is safe. Silence keeps jobs. Later that afternoon, Mallory, a young, ambitious intern-turned-fast riser, slid into the elevator beside me. "Hey," she said, leaning in conspiratorially. "I hope you don't mind, but Mara asked me to present your deck next week. She said you'd be cool with it." "Cool with it?" I blinked. "Sure," I said, my voice unnervingly even. "No problem." Mallory beamed. "Thanks. I mean, you laid all the groundwork. I'll just polish it up a bit." We rode the rest of the way in silence, my mind reeling. That night, I stayed late. The office was quiet, humming under the dull ceiling lights, the distant tapping of a faulty HVAC unit. I sat at my desk, staring at my own name in the corner of my slide deck, and wondered how long it would take before even I forgot I was the one who made it. They didn't need to fire me to make me feel erased. They just stopped seeing me. The next morning, I arrived earlier, hoping for a moment of peace. The office was still half lit. I headed to the lunchroom, needing water. I passed a cluster of interns trying not to laugh, who quickly dispersed when they saw me. No greetings, no guilt. I didn't ask. As I grabbed water, Joanna from accounting whispered, "Hey." She held her phone low. "I'm not supposed to show you this, but you deserve to know." On the screen, an email thread, forwarded countless times. Crystal clear, an image of me, wiping down a whiteboard, captioned, "When nepotism comes with a mop." Below it, a reply, "At least she's good at cleaning up Mara's messes." Joanna looked at me apologetically. I didn't laugh, she whispered. I just nodded, took my water, and left. Back at my desk, I stared out the window at the thick Seattle clouds. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just sat with the weight of it, letting it settle deep, invisible, just below the surface. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. I wasn't just overlooked. I was a punchline. That afternoon was the monthly recognition meeting, a hollow celebration. I wasn't expecting anything but this. The slideshow clicked through smiling faces. Then came the Data Innovation Award. That one stung. It was for my model, my projection of market shifts. But under the recognition line, Mallory Penn. Not a whisper of my name. Mara stood at the front, the picture of leadership. "Our young talent is what pushes us forward," she beamed, gesturing at Mallory. The applause was deafening, drowning out the ringing in my ears. Lucian caught my eye again. This time, he didn't look away, but still, he said nothing. That evening, needing a break, I tried to use a vending machine. It spat my dollar back, then swallowed it on the third try, freezing. It was stupid, insignificant, a minor annoyance, but something about it cracked the surface I'd been holding together all day. My hand shook, not from the machine, but from everything. "You don't break from the big blows," I whispered to myself. "It's the small cuts." The echo of your own name erased. I returned to my desk just before sunset. The office was empty. On my chair, a neatly placed folder. No note. Inside, a printed version of my latest presentation, every slide intact, every chart exactly as I'd laid it out. Except for one thing, Mallory's watermark, bottom right corner of every page. My name nowhere. I didn't even flinch. Not anymore. I checked the timestamp on the printer tray, printed 2 hours before the recognition meeting. I sat down, logged into my email, and opened a new draft. Subject: Documentation Negro 1. Attachment: a scanned copy of the folder. Body: blank. I hit send to myself. I stared at the screen for a few seconds longer, then shut the laptop. They thought I was quiet because I didn't know how to fight. What they didn't know is I had just started. The office was empty when I left. On the drive home, I kept the radio off, needing the quiet, not to think. Thinking hurt, but to let my thoughts unravel. The next day brought an investor visit, one of Mara's high-pressure showcases. The kind where we all pretended to be aligned, efficient, inspired. The kind where Mara subtly reminded everyone that the company bore her name, even if it belonged to our parents. The investor, Bennett, was friendly but calculating. Mara met him at the front, my mother, Keegan, right behind her. My mother, the matriarch, in her tailored navy suit, hair swept back, always in control. She greeted Bennett with polished confidence, guiding him into the hallway like she owned the building, which, in a way, she did. "This is Mara," she said, gesturing with a proud hand. "My daughter, the brain behind all of this." I stood 3 feet away. My mother didn't introduce me. She didn't even acknowledge my presence. Bennett turned to me anyway, politely puzzled. "And you are?" "Oh," I said, smiling just enough to be civil. "I'm the one who wipes down the whiteboard." He blinked, then let out a confused chuckle, like maybe it was a joke. It wasn't. Later that evening, my mother insisted we all have dinner with Bennett at some high-end seafood place downtown. White tablecloths, waiters who called you ma'am without irony. I didn't want to go, but not going would look petty weak. So I showed up, smiled through the introductions, and sat quietly while my mother bragged about Mara's high school debate trophies and early Stanford admission, conveniently omitting Mara's transfer after 2 semesters. She never mentioned my full ride to UCLA, my early graduation, or my national conference presentation before I was 30. She talked about Mara like she was the only daughter she ever had. I picked at my food, listening, watching Mara laugh and dazzle. And somewhere between the lobster bisque and the seared halibut, I realized the truth. There comes a moment when silence doesn't protect them anymore. It only exposes you. Back at the office later that week, I had to drop off a file in Mara's office. It was late, most staff had left. Her door was ajar. I stepped in. That's when I heard my mother's voice. "Listen," she said, her tone clipped, impatient. "You need to transition her out. Sooner, not later. People are starting to ask questions." Mara exhaled audibly. "She's not going anywhere. That's the problem. She's too close." My mother, chillingly, continued, "You know how this works. Keep her in the room, but far from the table." "I've been doing that for 6 months." Mara snapped. "She's just quiet. She doesn't fight. She never has." I didn't move. Just stood there, still as air. Quiet, but not empty. I gently set the file on a side table and stepped back out. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I didn't even feel angry. I felt awake. Back at my desk, I opened a new email. Subject: Documentation Sudo. Attachment: an audio recording from my phone, still running in my coat pocket. I hit send. That night at home, I sat on the floor in an oversized sweatshirt, tea going cold beside me. I pulled out a shoebox of old family photos. One of me at age 10, holding a science fair ribbon, had Mara in the background, arms crossed, not smiling. I used to think I was invisible because I wasn't good enough. But I wasn't invisible because I lacked value. I was invisible because I refused to shrink to fit their image of what enough looked like. That was the night I created a new folder on my laptop, Contingency Plan. Because if they were going to come for me, I wasn't just going to sit there. I'd been underestimated for too long. If they thought I wouldn't fight back, they weren't watching closely enough. The next morning, I paced my apartment, the kettle boiling over twice, forgetting my keys. I wasn't panicking, I was preparing. By the time I walked into the office, everything in me had shifted. I wasn't there to survive anymore. I was there to remember who I was before I let them rewrite me. I dropped my bag and checked my voicemail. I hadn't cleared them in weeks, couldn't stomach another, just checking in. But today I did. Second message down. "Hi, Ms. Monroe. This is Kayla from Eastbrook Data. We met briefly at the Boston Tech Summit in June. Our director of strategy is moving to Europe, and we'd love to talk to you about stepping into that role. We think your work with consumer behavioral modeling is exactly the direction we need." The message was 5 weeks old. Boston. Director level. Real recognition. And I had ignored it because 6 weeks ago, Mara had looked me in the eyes and said, "I can't save this company without you, T. I trust you more than anyone." I thought I was helping my sister rebuild something worth saving. Turns out I was just hammering nails into my own coffin. Later that afternoon, our quarterly strategy meeting. I knew what was coming. The presentation was titled Predictive Models for Consumer Pulse. That was mine. My code, my project, my sweat. I watched as the screen lit up with my charts, my formulas, my structure, repackaged under a fresh title. Mallory walked to the front, in her pressed blouse and patent leather heels, smiling like she'd spent 3 months coding in the dark. She began, "I'm proud to present a predictive framework we've been building to anticipate regional consumer behavior." Mallory didn't even know the difference between logistic and linear regression until I explained it to her last month. And there was Mara at the back, nodding along, proud as a mother at a recital. She didn't speak until the end, then clapped twice and said, "Exactly what I envisioned when I hired fresh minds to shake things up." Fresh minds. I sat frozen, every cell in my body screaming, but my face stayed calm. When the meeting ended, an automated message appeared in my inbox. Subject: Thank you. Body: Great note-taking today, Tersa. Your support makes everything run smoother. Support. I walked slowly back to my desk, shut my laptop, then opened the draft folder on my desktop. Inside was the original version of the deck, my name on every page, my notes in the margin, time-stamped edits saved on a cloud account I controlled. There was no denying it. No room for, maybe you misunderstood. I highlighted the entire folder and dragged it into the Contingency Plan Phase 2 directory. Then I backed it up in 3 more places. After work, I skipped the bus and walked, needing the air, the space. By the time I got home, the sky was fading to blue-gray. I poured a glass of wine, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop again. I remembered a name Dorian had mentioned once, a lawyer who specialized in intellectual property disputes. I found her email, attached the full folder. No note, no signature, just the subject line. Intellectual property theft. Internal evidence attached. I hit send. That night, I didn't sleep much, but I didn't toss and turn. I was done waiting for someone else to call it what it was. This time, I was sending the signal and someone was going to answer it. By the time the office lights flicked on the next morning, I was already seated at the far corner of the conference room, right next to the humming printer. It wasn't even subtle. My name had been left off the agenda again. No welcome slide, no introduction, not even a seating card. Junior staffers sat at the main table. Mallory had a full section to herself. She glanced my way briefly, then turned back to her tablet. She knew. They all did. I didn't ask questions. I didn't try to fix it. I just pulled out my phone, opened the voice recorder, and set it face down beside my notepad. The presentation began, bloated with recycled metrics, half of which had originated in my research. When one of the interns incorrectly summarized a dataset I'd built from scratch, no one corrected her. When Mara stepped in to wrap things up, she nodded toward the team like a school principal on awards day. "These are the future of Monroe Analytics," she said, all smile and spin. "And let's be honest, fresh eyes see things we often miss." Fresh eyes like mine were cataracts. The meeting ran long. When it finally ended, I waited until the hallway cleared before packing up. As I reached for my bag, a new email pinged on my screen. It had been sent to a small group, myself accidentally included. Subject: Thursday debrief. Internal only. The first line: honestly, she's just good for coffee runs and filling out the diversity line item. Another reply came seconds later: she still thinks she's in the running for VP. Adorable. And one more: we should frame that mop picture, or better yet, name a conference room after her. I didn't react. Not outwardly. I hit forward to my secure email. Subject: documentation, server 3. Body empty. I closed the tab, then walked calmly out of the room and into the hallway, where Mara was standing near the coffee station, chatting with Bennett, the investor. Her voice was light, performative, the way it always was when she had something to gain. She noticed me. "T, don't forget to restock the sugar packets. I think we're low again." I stepped forward, just close enough for her to hear me. "If you push again," I said, steady and quiet, "I'll push back." Not like before. Not silently. Her mouth curved into that practice smile she used in press photos. "Oh, come on, sis. Lighten up. It's just work." But there was a pause, barely half a second, before she spoke again. That hesitation was all I needed. Back at my desk, I opened the storage drawer and found the printed slides from last week's meeting, the ones with the wrong data Mallory had presented. I clipped a note to the top: no accusations, just corrections, and placed it in Lucian's internal mail slot. He found me an hour later. Didn't say a word, just walked past and slipped a folded paper into the side pocket of my tote bag. Inside, a printed copy of the email chain, the same one I'd already forwarded, but it wasn't from me. Someone else had flagged it. Someone inside the circle. I stared at it for a long time, my fingers tracing the words like they might burn. They didn't. Not anymore. The hallway buzzed with Friday energy, but something else floated in the air now. A weight. A slowness. Like the room was holding its breath. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was them. Because when truth lingers too long in silence, even the liars start looking over their shoulders. The next time I saw Mara was during the Friday investor luncheon. Everything was staged: name cards, catered salad, scripted toasts, even lemon slices floating in the water like performance props. I knew better than to expect anything less than theater. But I didn't expect what came next. I was standing by the long table, quietly pouring myself a second cup of coffee. The room was buzzing when Mara swept in, perfectly timed and dressed, two tall lattes in her hands. Her eyes scanned the room, then landed on me with that familiar glint I had learned not to trust. She walked toward me, smiling like it meant something, and at the very last second, tripped. The coffee cup in her right hand flew up, arced slightly, then landed squarely in my lap. The heat punched through my dress slacks before the pain even registered. "Oh no," she gasped, voice high and sugar-coated, eyes widening. "Tirsa, I'm so sorry." "Still your favorite, right?" People laughed. Not everyone, but enough. A few turned away. One or two looked like they wanted to say something, but didn't. My skin was burning. My thighs stung, the fabric clinging in wet patches. I didn't shout. I didn't flinch. I looked her dead in the eye, smiled just enough to confuse her, and then walked out of the room slowly and upright, coffee soaking through every step. I went straight to the restroom, locked the stall, and stood there breathing, one hand on the cold metal, the other against the scarlet stain growing on my thigh. This wasn't clumsy. It wasn't accidental. It was her final warning. But what she didn't know was it was also mine. I changed into workout leggings, cleaned up, and returned to my desk. A new email waited. Subject: Congratulations, Mallory. I opened it. In bold: Please join us in welcoming Mallory Penn to her new role as Director of Data Operations. The position I had outlined, the department I had spent months rebuilding, the workflow I had designed from scratch, handed over like a party favor. And below the announcement, a quote from Mara: "Young women like Mallory are the future of Monroe Analytics." I didn't feel betrayed anymore. I felt confirmed. It wasn't neglect. It was strategy. And I'd played right into it until now. I opened the encrypted folder on my personal drive. I uploaded the footage from the security camera near the elevator. Full view of the spill. The angle was perfect. Her trajectory. Her smirk a second before impact. Crystal clear. Then I added the mentorship logs, the full document detailing every time I reviewed Mallory's data, corrected her models, prepped her presentations, dates, signatures, even her notes in my handwriting. The folder name had already been decided. Public disclosure, Stage 1. I opened my leather-bound journal and wrote just one sentence. They gave me coffee. I'll give them fire. By early evening, most of the office had emptied. I was updating documentation for the legal team when I heard a knock. Lucian stood in the hallway, expression unreadable. He didn't speak. He just walked over and placed a brown envelope on my desk, then turned and left. Inside, an HR complaint form, already signed, anonymous, but the wording was unmistakable. It referenced a hostile incident in a public professional setting. It named no names, but the incident description could only be one thing: the coffee. At the bottom, the HR officer's handwriting read, "Filed under review." I leaned back, exhaled slowly. There were eyes now, watching quietly, maybe even regretfully. Not everyone would say something. Not everyone was brave. But not everyone was blind anymore either. And if they wanted a show, they were about to get one they couldn't delete. That following Monday began like any other, but something about the stillness in the room felt rehearsed, too clean, too coordinated. By mid-morning, the announcement hit every inbox. Subject: Leadership in Sync. Meet the Monroe Women. Body: Sisterhood and Innovation. The Monroe Women leading together. I stared at the subject line, blinking once before opening it. There it was, a full-page press release, glossy and glowing. A photo of Mara and me, smiling side by side. Except I hadn't smiled like that in months. The picture was from last year's holiday mixer, cropped and filtered to remove everyone around us, altered just enough to make us look like a united front. The caption: a legacy of trust, vision, and sisterhood. Mara was quoted beneath it: "My sister and I have always believed in building this together. We thrive because we lead together." I didn't know whether to laugh or throw my mug across the room. Instead, I clicked print. As the page slid out, I whispered under my breath, the photo was real. The moment never happened. 2 hours later, I got a ping from a client I hadn't spoken to in a while, Marcus from Denver. He forwarded a proposal that had been sent to him for a new cross-regional data analysis initiative. His message was short. Hey, Sa, didn't you mention this structure to me last quarter? I opened the attachment. My structure, my analysis flow, my predictive grid. Word for word. Only 2 names were listed, Mallory Penn and Mara Keegan. No acknowledgement, not a footnote, not a based on a concept by. Nothing. But there it was, buried in the metadata. My watermark, dated, logged, unmistakable. I stared at the screen, then slowly closed my laptop. They weren't just trying to erase me. They were replacing me in real time. One asset, one headline, one client proposal at a time. That afternoon, the company held a quarterly town hall. All hands, cameras rolling, clients and partners on Zoom. The topic, shared vision, Monroe's next chapter. Mara took the stage, wearing her signature navy blazer and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. She launched into a speech about leadership, vision, and family legacy. I sat in the back row, perfectly still. I didn't interrupt. I didn't raise my voice. I waited until the Q&A. When they opened the floor, I stood up, calm, steady. Mara, I said, can you clarify when exactly you and I last co-authored a project together? You could hear the air change. The mic handler hesitated. Someone coughed. Mara blinked only slightly, but it was enough. She forced a smile. Tirsa, I'm not sure that's relevant to today's discussion. No, I tilted my head. Because it's relevant to the article you published this morning, and it's certainly relevant to the client proposal sent to Denver yesterday. Silence. A junior staffer raised her hand and said carefully, didn't Tirsa design Project Cora? Another voice chimed in, this time from the tech team. Yeah, the predictive grid was hers. We beta tested it back in October. Then Lucian stood up, quiet but firm. I can confirm the timestamped files. The source material is Sa Monroe's. No one laughed. No one looked away this time. I looked around the room. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to plead. She built a family of mirrors. I lit one match. And just like that, the silence that once protected her was about to testify against her. After the town hall, people left the auditorium quickly, but not toward me. No one said anything, not even Lucian. His usual nod was replaced with lowered eyes as he passed my row. Back at my desk, I ate lunch alone again. The cold pasta tasted like cardboard, but I kept chewing one bite after another. Like always, no one sat next to me. No one mentioned the Q&A. No one acknowledged what they'd heard, because doing so might require choosing a side, and that would mean risk. It's funny how silence isn't neutral. It just waits to see who's going to win before it speaks. I was clearing my dishes when the elevator bell dinged. The sound wasn't unusual until I heard it again. A pause, then the steps. 2 men in dark suits walked out first, scanning the room like they already knew where to go. Then came the third figure, Dorian. He didn't wear the usual softness he carried at home, no loosened tie, no casual button-down. He wore a fitted black suit, no tie, eyes focused straight ahead. It wasn't just his clothes. It was the way the air shifted around him, like the room had finally decided to listen. Mara appeared from her office, faltering just slightly. She put on her usual grin, the one she reserved for investors, for cameras, but her shoulders weren't sitting right. Dorian, she said, as if she'd just bumped into an old college friend. We weren't expecting. He cut her off with a quiet, let's make this brief. The boardroom doors opened as if on cue. I followed, not because I was told to, but because I knew what was coming. Inside, Mara sat at the head, flanked by 3 executive assistants. Lucian took his seat silently. I stayed standing. Dorian placed a single manila folder in front of her, then another in front of Lucian. Transfer of controlling interest, he said simply. Effective immediately, Monroe Analytics now belongs majority to Wexler Holdings. It's been a quiet acquisition by design. Mara's face didn't fall. It froze. This is a joke. Dorian remained still. No. What's been happening in this company for the last year? That's the joke. I'm here to end it. She laughed once, sharp. You bought us out? That's your revenge for me defending this place. He didn't flinch. You defended a lie. You curated a brand. You erased people. Then he turned to Lucian. I'll be appointing interim compliance and ethics leadership, starting with a full audit of internal communications, reporting structures, and project authorship. Lucian gave a single, solid nod. Dorian looked to me next. I reached into my bag, pulled out a USB, and walked calmly to the screen at the front of the room. I plugged it in. One click. The first slide, a screenshot of the internal email where I was called Diversity Decor. Next, a proposal to a client with Mallory's name pasted over my model. Then, footage from the security camera showing Mara's very intentional coffee spill. And finally, a single slide with text in bold. If silence protects the abuser, let noise redeem the truth. No music, no voiceover, just truth, laid bare. Mallory, seated in the corner, buried her face in her hands. Lucian looked directly at Mara. Do you have anything to say for yourself? She blinked. Once, twice. This is a hit job. It's a correction, I said. Dorian stood. Effective immediately, Mara Keegan is removed from her role. A review of all project leads will begin this week. Your contract is terminated, pending legal review. Mara's voice cracked. You're doing this now? Here? In front of her. Dorian didn't look at me when he said, You did it to yourself. You just didn't expect anyone to say so out loud. She turned to our mother, seated at the far end of the room. Mom didn't speak. She didn't move. She stared out the window like she didn't recognize either of us. As the room emptied, one by one, I stayed behind. I wasn't done. I had one last thing to say. I waited until the last door clicked shut behind them. The boardroom was still, except for the quiet hum of the projector cooling down. I walked over and removed the USB from the port, tucking it into the inside pocket of my blazer like I'd done it 100 times before. I didn't need to say anything more, but I did. I turned toward the window where my mother still stood, unmoved. She hadn't looked at me once since it all unfolded. Her reflection on the glass was sharper than her presence in the room. I stepped closer, enough for her to hear. You said once I was too soft to survive this world, I said, calm, not bitter. Turns out just quiet enough to outlast it. She blinked slowly. You look more like your father these days. I nodded. He always said truth doesn't need a microphone. There was no apology. I wasn't waiting for one. Later that week, I returned to the office early just as the cleaning crew was finishing up. The lobby looked the same, but the energy was different, lighter. The whispers had shifted.